So, thank you guys for coming to cover this story. In an effort to keep the public up to date on the actions of the Cheektowaga Police Department and to be transparent in the steps of our investigation, I felt it was important to get out in front of our community and just update them on the incident that happened this past week in the town of Cheektowaga. On Wednesday, September 28th, officers responded to an address on Barbara Place for a complaint that a female victim was punched by her husband. Officers spoke with the victim, Adam Bennefield, and based upon their initial investigation, determined that the suspect, Adam Bennefield, should be arrested for harassment. Prior to police arriving at the address on Barbara Place, the suspect had locked himself in the bathroom. Officers were able to gain entry to the bathroom. Due to the condition that the suspect was in when located, officers decided to transport the suspect to ECMC Hospital for both a medical and psychological evaluation. Officers filed for a warrant for the suspect and advised the victim to call the police if he returned. On Thursday, the Cheektowaga Police Department's domestic violence advocate followed up with this victim. The victim told the advocate that she did in fact suffer injuries from the incident and that she had video of the incident. The domestic violence advocate passed this information along to a CPD detective. The detective called the victim and arranged to have the victim send a copy of the video to the detective so that a further investigation could be completed. On Friday, the detective still did not have the video, so he followed up with the victim and made an appointment to meet with her on Monday to get a copy of the video. On Sunday night, the victim called police because she thought somebody was in her home. Police responded but did not locate anybody. While speaking with the victim showed the responding officers the video of the incident from Wednesday. The video showed a much more violent incident than what was originally reported to the original responding officer. Those officers called in detectives to the scene to begin a further investigation that night. On Monday morning, the victim met with detectives, and based upon new evidence, the charges from Wednesday's incidents were upgraded to a misdemeanor assault charge and other misdemeanor charges. Officers attempted to locate the suspect to arrest him, but were unable to. The suspect did eventually call the detectives back later that night, and he was advised to turn himself in. The next morning, Tuesday, the suspect did turn himself in to the Cheektowaga Police Department detectives. He was booked and held to see our court. The detectives notified the court of the threat that the suspect presented to the victim. The CPD domestic violence advocate made contact with the assistant district attorney handling the case and made them aware of the threat that this suspect presented. The domestic violence advocate was advised that the charges were not qualifying charges and that the suspect could not be held. So the domestic violence advocate insisted that an order of protection be issued. The suspect was arraigned and a stay-away order of protection was issued against the suspect. The suspect was released by the court. After being released by the court, the domestic violence advocate advised the victim that the suspect was released. The advocate was working with the victim to find safe housing and develop a safety plan. The victim stated that she would be staying at her mother's home. We've seen the tragic result of domestic violence this week. We've taken many, many steps, and we've learned from previous tragedies. Our thoughts are with the family, and especially the children of this victim. As police, we are here to protect our public, and we do everything that we can. What that looks like is different for me compared to what my officers on the street can do. They are the first responders. They are the ones who have to intervene when the incident is happening. On my level, and the level of police chief, so our level is above that. We don't get to be the first ones on scene, but we still try to help. Just this past year, a contingent of Western New York chiefs met with some of our local elected leaders to express our concerns on some of the recent changes to criminal justice reform and issues within our state. New York State is the last state that doesn't take into account the dangerousness of a defendant to the community when considering bail. That is something that we've asked for. That is something that we will continue to ask for, and we hope that our elected officials consider those changes. Every way you look at it, this is a tragedy. This has affected our community. It's affected a family in our community. It's affected our officers who felt that they were doing everything that they could to keep this victim safe. And tragically, we were unable to. I encourage anybody who can help us get the message out that we need some change to help us get that message out. At this point, I'll take any questions regarding the incident in Cheektowaga.
So he was charged with second-degree false imprisonment, but there's a 2020 amendment to bail reform that says that they can use bail in an instance of first-degree false imprisonment. Can you explain the differences in those two charges and why he wasn't charged with first-degree instead of second-degree? Charged with second-degree instead of first-degree.
So I would say, so in this incident, as you can imagine, there's been a ton of information. There's been a lot that we have tried to put together at the last minute to get some information out to the public because, the story's spreading. There's a lot of stuff that's going out as far as, what the police did or didn't do to help protect this woman. Off the top of my head, I can't explain that to you. I know that our detectives were called. This wasn't just a street officer who made a decision on the street. The detectives were called in. They investigated. They also consulted with their supervisor on what the charges were to be. And if a more serious charge would have been applicable, I'm sure that they would have charged it to be able to articulate exactly what the facts of the case were. I don't have that off the top of my head right here.
Can you say how soon after the suspect was released, the victim was notified that he was released?
I know that the domestic violence advocate was present in court. I know that she was working with the district attorney to make sure first that the threat was understood and then that the order of protection was issued. The domestic violence advocate did tell me that after court that the victim was notified. A timeline, I don't know. I would assume that she left court and called, but I don't have the exact times of when that happened.
I understand everything that you're saying, but what do you say to family and friends of this woman who say that this woman was asking police for help because she felt like her life was at stake and they don't feel like the police department protected her from this man?
My concern is that they don't know everything that we did, which is why I had this press conference. Clearly, more facts of the case came out as the time went on. The video was never mentioned to the first responding officer. Had we had that, there would have been more done sooner. But ultimately, the most serious charge that we could have laid against this defendant, this suspect, was laid after an investigation. There were connections made between a domestic violence advocate with the victim. They were in contact many times prior to Tuesday morning. And, there were just many, many steps that we have taken. As far as going to court, making sure the court knew, making sure the district attorney who was there for the arraignment knew, and then ultimately up to the last question of once we found out he was released, the domestic violence advocate went back and even made sure that the victim understood that he was released and was continuing to work on, a safety plan with her. There will be a full review of this case in New York State. Whenever there's a domestic violence related fatality, there is a review that takes place by state agencies to look at it. And I'll be interested, as a chief of police who's tasked with making sure we have good practices in place to figure out if there was something more that we could have done. Tragically at this point, from our point of view, we tried to do everything we could to help this young woman, and it ended up in a tragic result.
To that point, how frustrating is it that you're essentially battling against state guidelines, and in this case it seems as though the justice system failed this woman and this family?
It's extremely frustrating. No matter what guidelines you have, there are evil people in our world, and we will, see tragedies like this. We can't speculate, would he have made bail if there was bail? There's a million things you can look at. But it is extremely frustrating when you have so many steps in place and you know somebody is dangerous. You know there's a clear and present danger, yet the court has no option but to let this person back out into our community. It's almost like we have to wait till they do something bad enough to keep them. And we recognize that as leaders of police agencies. We recognize that, and we continue the fight to make our voices heard for our public that we are charged with protecting.
Given the history of this suspect, was it possible that the victim could have been placed in some kind of protective custody?
That's what they were working on, a safety plan and a safe place for her. She had stated to the domestic violence advocate that she felt safe at her mother's house until something better was found for her. Domestic violence housing, that's not really, we don't go into deep details about that because a lot of those people who end up there are in fear of being found by their abuser. So, I'm not going to share a whole lot of what that looks like and where we house people, but the steps were in place. The ball was moving. The gentleman was arrested, and right after being arrested, she was advised that, in fact, he was going to be out and was continuing to work with our advocate.
Do you know if kids were present when this happened?
When what?
In the house, the September 28th assault, if the kids were there, or was it the two adults in the house?
I believe there was one young child in the house, and I know that just from reading the report, one child had gotten on the school bus as the mother was getting home. So,
does that impact charges that you can?
I know that we did do a referral to Child Protection Services based upon the original incident, and that's standard practice. We talk about, going back to your question of, what do we say that, to people who say that we could have done more. There's just so many things, and there's more. This is an extremely complex case. There's a lot more, and just the fact that whenever there's a domestic violence incident in front of children, that we do that referral. That's standard practice. We do that, and in this case, it still wasn't enough.
So the judge that made the decision is a former law enforcement officer, and in making the decision, he was allowed to consider factors that would lead to flight risk, any current past charges. This man escaped from prison back in 2000. To you as a law enforcement officer, is that a flight risk?
So I can't speak to, the judge's actions, and the judge can't speak to that during an ongoing case either. So, there are going to be some questions that don't get answered. I think when you look at the decision to hold somebody or not, the important thing from my point of view, is that there are two decisions that get made when we talk about bail. Bail can either be set prior to arraignment by the police, or then by the court after they get arraigned. And there may be other weird circumstances, but from the police side, we have a set of rules that we have to follow when we arrest somebody, whether we hold them for court, whether we place bail on them, or whether we give them a desk appearance ticket. The court has a totally separate set of rules that I really can't comment on, because that's not the book that we operate out of. So it's a fair question. I think at some point, that's one for the courts, not for me. So.
I think looking at the video, why weren't these felonies? Because I think most people who've seen the video would say that's a felony.
Yeah.
So why is it a misdemeanor?
Based upon the degree of injury. In order to rise to a felony assault, you need a more serious injury. And this victim in this case, from the initial incident, the facts of the case, the injuries that were sustained, did not rise to a felony level.
The $7,500 reward was increased from $1,500, correct?
I'm going to stick to the Cheektowaga incident, and then I'm going to turn it over to the commissioner to make a statement about the search for the suspect.
Was there history in that family of domestic violence at all?
I can speak specifically just to this incident, and when I tell you, we have we threw this together, and then we said 4:30. I wish I would have said 11:30 because I'd still be reading everything. There's a lot of information on this case. I know we have been there previously. I can't speak specifically to what the history
What
was.
relation is he to the case?
I don't have that. I don't have that. I'm sorry. All right.
Do you know what area he hangs out in?
As far as the search, I'm not. I don't have that info. I'm going to turn it over to the commissioner and make a statement on the search for Mr. Bennefield. Commissioner.
All right, good afternoon. I'm going to speak just on the homicide yesterday and what our efforts are to locate this individual here. So at approximately 8:30 yesterday morning at the intersection of Shawnee and Rich Lawn in the city of Buffalo, police officers in E District actually pulled up on the location, observed an incident that had occurred. It had already occurred. A vehicle left that scene. Police officers made an attempt to stop that vehicle. The vehicle had refused to pull over for our officers. It was a heavily congested area, traffic area. The vehicle, from the information I have, got on the 33 expressway going in the wrong direction. Due to a lot of reasons, the officers lost sight of the vehicle. They were able to evade. A very short time later, the officers located the vehicle, which is the vehicle in question, and located evidence inside of that vehicle. Our detectives immediately started working the case, working up leads, gaining enough information to get to the point that we can develop a person of interest, that we can actually get that information out. Our detectives have worked this case nonstop, which have included other units within our department, not just our homicide squad, in efforts to locate the individual. We have also engaged the help of some of our federal partners with some other avenues to help locate this individual as well. We are putting out a reward with Crime Stoppers. As you can see, it's a $7,500 reward. Anyone with any information on Adam Bennefield, we encourage you to call 911. You can also call Crime Stoppers. If anybody sees this person, don't attempt to intercede yourself. Please call 911. Stay safe. We consider him to be armed and dangerous. He is a person of interest in this homicide. We are looking to bring him in safely and quickly. And again, anybody that has any information, please contact us and know that we have been working this case 24/7 since it occurred. We have a lot of resources that we are putting into this to get this individual in custody. Again, as Chief Gould said, this is an awful, awful, tragic ending to a domestic violence incident. Our hearts go out to the family, to the children. Obviously, this is something that will be forever lasting for that family.
Was she wearing a bulletproof vest at the time?
I'm not going to get into specifics of the case. Hopefully, with a cooperation and the assistance of the community, we can get the person of interest into our custody, and at such a time we'll be able to be in a better position to answer more questions. And please understand, there are things that I can't talk about and I have to hold back for the benefit of the investigation. But for right now, the important thing is locating this individual as a person of interest.
Do you think he's hiding out around here, and do you think he's getting help from other people?
Our belief right now is that he is still local. On part two of that question, I don't have an answer to that, but we believe he is still local.
What will it take to upgrade him from a person of interest to suspect, and will that affect search efforts in any way, shape, or form?
There's no difference in what we're doing right now. So I'll just say that. We are using every available resource to locate him.
There's rumors that he may have considered committing suicide. Do you have evidence that supports he's alive? Do you believe him to be alive?
I have no information to what you're saying. I have no information on that. I believe he's still alive, and he is still out there.
And then my question about the reward, we had someone sort of complain that the reward was originally $1,500 and they felt like that was insignificant. Can you explain what led to increasing the reward to this much?
It was an inadvertent post that was sent out. It was a $2,500 reward. Homicides used to be with Crime Stoppers, a $2,500 reward. We got that corrected very quickly and sent out the updated bulletin. The reward is $7,500. there are past cases where the reward was at 25. We fixed that, and it was taken care of quickly. You know, and again, we encourage anyone to contact us.
Are you able to speak about his past offenses, such as the ones that happened in 2000 that were kind of similar to this case?
I don't. That is public record by this point. He was convicted. He served, I believe it was 15 years for that. It's my understanding he got released from prison in 2015. So I don't have enough to speak at length. That went through the whole legal process back then.
And her kids were in the car at the time that she was killed?
I'm not going to comment on that. I know there's other reports. I'll leave it with other reports. Again, that gets into evidentiary stuff that I'm not going to comment on the scene, the specifics of the scene. Anything else?
Is there anything we didn't ask you that you think people should know about?
You know, at this point, we would just like to safely and efficiently, quickly have Adam Bennefield in our custody so that we can, you know, put an end to this.
If somebody is helping him, what are they risking?
I don't want to go down that road of speculating, but if somebody is, anyone is assisting him in preventing police from finding him, there are consequences to that. I would highly encourage anyone that has any information on him to please call 911. Let the police handle this.
You've talked a lot about bail reform in the past. I mean, do you think bail reform is to complain, or to, is, you know, a reason that this man was backed out? You know, is that a reason to blame for this incident happening here?
For the purposes of this at this time, I'm going to stick to this part of it. Any comments on that, you know, could potentially come at a later date.
Were they still, what was their relationship situation? Should we be calling them husband and wife, or were they estranged, or?
Legally, I don't know exactly what.
They were living together in Cheektowaga?
I'm not going to get into that part. I don't have a domestic history in the city of Buffalo, so I'm not going to get into the past. I'm concentrating right now on the homicide that occurred yesterday and our efforts in his search. So I'm not going to comment about things that came before that.
But they both have the same last name?
They both have the same last name. And we did release the victim's name. That went out, I think, around the 3 o'clock hour, so you should all have that at this point. So, all right, thank you very much.